Everyone, and welcome to the Cross-Trained Counselor meeting student needs across school, mental health, and post-secondary spaces. My name is Dr. Chris Rogutsky, and I serve as the Program Director of Graduate Counseling at Manhattan University, and I'm a visiting professor. I also work in a K-12 context several days a week. I'm joined by my colleague, Mr. Nicholas Iadivio, who brings deep expert experience working at the intersection of school and mental health counseling. So together we'll explore how the counselor's role has evolved and why being cross-trained across these academic, mental health, and post-secondary domains is no longer optional but essential. So this session is designed to be both reflective and practical, and we'll look at the current mental health landscape, unpack strategies for integrating support systems, and discuss how we can help students transition successfully to life beyond high school, emotionally, socially, and academically. So let's begin. So, when we think back to how the role of the school counselor was once defined, it looked a lot like what we see on the left side of this slide. Traditionally, we were responsible for things like academic scheduling, helping students choose courses, guiding them through the college application process, offering career exploration resources, and stepping in during moments of crises. And that model, while still important, no longer reflects the full reality, right, of what students need or what we're being called to do. So today's school counselors, as shown on the right side, are often the first line of response for mental health concerns. And we are expected to implement trauma-informed practices, to recognize the impact of systemic inequalities, and to take an equity focused approach in every aspect of advising. And perhaps most importantly, we're tasked with nurturing holistic student development, meaning we're considering the emotional, social, and mental well being alongside academics and career readiness. So, the school counselor's role has expanded dramatically. We now operate at that intersection of multiple critical support systems, right? Academic, emotional, and developmental. And this shift requires us to become what I call cross trained counselors, professionals who can integrate knowledge and skills across domains to better meet the complex needs of the students that we serve. So, as we step into this next section, I want to ground our discussion in the data because these numbers tell a powerful and heartbreaking story. So, according to the CDC's Youth Risk Behavior Survey, 42% of high school students reported experiencing persistent sadness or hopelessness in 2021. And that's nearly half of all adolescents walking through our halls every day. 22%, more than one in five, said they had seriously considered attempting suicide in the past year. And one in three teens reported that their mental health was poor most of the time. Now, I don't share these numbers to shock you. I share them because they represent real young people, students sitting in our classrooms, showing up in our offices, walking our hallways, often while struggling in silence. And these statistics confirm what most of us already feel intuitively, that we are in the midst of a profound mental health crisis among youth. And because schools are where students spend most of their time, and because school counselors are among the few adults they may consistently interact with, we have become the de facto first responders in that crisis. So the need for accessible, comprehensive, and integrated mental health support has never been more urgent. And this is not peripheral to our work anymore, it is our work. So, when we talk about the mental health crisis among youth, it's essential to understand that there isn't just one cause. There are multiple overlapping forces shaping how students experience the world today. So, let's start with social media and technology. Our students are growing up in a culture of constant connectivity, where self worth is often measured in likes, views, and follows. And the comparison culture online, coupled with cyberbullying and disrupted sleep patterns, can fuel things like anxiety, depression, and distorted self perception. And many teens feel pressure to maintain a digital version of themselves that looks far more put together than they actually feel. So next we have academic pressure. So we've seen a dramatic increase in stress related to college admissions, testing, and GPA competition. Even the most capable students describe feeling chronically overwhelmed, not just by workload, but by the belief that their future hinges on every grade. And the pursuit of perfection is taking a real toll on their emotional health. Then there's social isolation. The pandemic didn't just interrupt schooling, right? It disrupted development. And many of our current students lost critical years of social learning, peer connection, and self definition. We're now seeing that gap play out in increased loneliness, anxiety, and difficulty regulating emotions. And finally, societal uncertainty. Our young people are incredibly aware of climate anxiety, social justice tensions, and political polarization. They're growing up in a world that feels unstable, and they're internalizing that uncertainty. And what's important to remember is that no single factor operates in isolation. Students are navigating multiple pressures simultaneously, and our job as counselors is to help them contextualize those stressors and build resilience across the whole picture of their lives. So, this slide captures the heart of today's conversation, why cross training matters. So, let's start with this idea. Again, students don't compartmentalize. A student's mental health challenge doesn't pause when they walk into algebra, and their academic stress doesn't disappear when they leave for therapy. So, when a student is anxious about college, let's say it shows up in their sleep patterns, their attendance, and their sense of self worth. When they're struggling socially, it can affect motivation, focus, and even physical health. And students experience their lives as one interconnected system, and our counseling approach has to reflect that reality. The second point, access barriers are real. So we all know how hard it can be for families to find or afford outside mental health care. Cost, insurance gap, cultural stigma, right? Transportation issues and long wait lists make access nearly impossible for many. And that means that we, as school counselors, are often the most accessible mental health informed professionals in a student's life. So, cross training allows us to bridge that gap, to recognize symptoms, provide stabilization, and make effective referrals when needed. And finally, early intervention prevents escalation. So when counselors are trained to recognize warning signs early, things like changes in mood, attendance, or engagement, we can intervene before a situation becomes a crisis. So this doesn't mean we're taking the place of therapists. It means we're creating seamless transitions between academic support, mental health care, and post secondary planning. And when we integrate these three areas, academic, emotional, and developmental, we stop reacting in silos and start working as part of a coordinated system of care. So, what does this cross training actually look like in practice? This slide illustrates it as a cycle, a continuous way of thinking and working, if you will, rather than a checklist. So, it begins with assessing holistically. When a student comes to us with an academic concern, we don't stop at the surface. We ask what else might be happening. We consider their emotional health, their social context, their family situation, even their emerging career identity. So, academic, emotional, social, and career factors all belong in the same conversation. From there, we connect the dots. So, we recognize that when something shifts or something is shifting in one area, say something like attendance drops or motivation declines, it often signals something deeper. A student's failing grade may not be about ability, it might be about anxiety, grief, or burnout. And seeing those connections help us intervene in meaningful ways. So next we apply integrated strategies. So this means drawing on tools from all three domains, academic, mental health, and post-secondary at the same time. So for example, using a brief mindfulness exercise before a college essay session, or integrating motivational interviewing techniques into academic advising. It's about blending rather than compartmentalizing. And finally, we navigate resources. So, cross trained counselors know when a student's needs exceed our scope, and we connect them effectively to outside support, whether that's a therapist, a community partner, or a college disability office. So, we stay part of that loop so that care is coordinated rather than fragmented. And this cyclical approach keeps us constantly viewing each student through multiple lenses, allowing us to address root causes instead of reacting to isolated symptoms. So it's a mindset, one that transforms our daily work into a more comprehensive and connected practice. So now that we've talked about the mindset behind cross training, let's get practical. So, what does it actually take to build these competencies? So, the first step is to develop mental health literacy. We need to be able to recognize the signs and symptoms of common conditions, anxiety, depression, trauma responses, panic attacks, dissociation, and more. So, this does not mean diagnosing, it means recognizing patterns and knowing when to act. So, a counselor who can spot the early indicators of distress can help prevent escalation and connect students to care before a crisis emerges. Next, understand referral pathways. Every counselor should have a working knowledge of local and virtual mental health resources, who accepts which insurance, where the sliding scale options are, and what crisis lines or walk-in centers exist in your areas. So building relationships with those providers strengthens the bridge between school and community services. Third, integrate evidence-based practices. So we don't need to be clinicians to use micro interventions that work. So techniques like motivational interviewing, brief CBT reframing, grounding exercises, or mindfulness can be seamlessly woven into everyday counseling sessions. So even small adjustments, such as how we phrase a question, can increase a student's sense of agency and self-efficacy. Fourth, we want to stay current on post-secondary trends. So the landscape is shifting rapidly. Colleges are developing mental health leave policies. They're offering expanded disability services, everything under the sun, but I have to say that they vary widely, right? So understanding those systems helps us guide students not just toward college acceptance, but towards college success. So that includes knowing about alternative pathways, whether that be community college starts or gap years of vocational programs as valid and healthy options. And finally, we want to practice self-care and boundary setting. This work is emotionally demanding. It is. So, cross trained counselors often carry the emotional weight of their students' stories. So, maintaining our own well being is essential. Knowing our scope of practice, honoring our limits, and seeking supervision on peer consultation are all part of that ethical, sustainable counseling. So, when we invest in these 5 areas, we build both our competence and our confidence, allowing us to meet students where they are with both skill and compassion. So, as students prepare to leave high school, they're stepping into one of the most critical and vulnerable developmental transitions of their lives. They're navigating identity formation, new independence, major life decisions, and academic challenges all at once. So, research consistently shows that young adults ages 18 to 25 experience the highest prevalence of mental illness of any age group. And yet, this is precisely the moment when they are leaving behind their school based support systems, the counselors, teachers, and structures that have anchored them for years. And this is where our cross train lens becomes essential because we can play a vital role in helping students move through this transition with both confidence and support. So let's break that down into 3 key areas. First, prepare for independence, right? We want to help students develop self-advocacy skills before they leave us. Things like knowing how to access care, how to speak to a professor about accommodations, or how to refill a prescription. So before graduation, have them identify mental health resources near their college or in their new community. Preparation reduces anxiety and will definitely help empower them to feel, to feel like there's additional self-efficacy there. So second, we want to normalize help seeking. So many students still view asking for help as a sign of weakness, especially high achievers. So we can help reframe that by celebrating help seeking as a form of strength and maturity. And this might mean talking openly in senior meetings or workshops about mental health supports so students know it's okay, even healthy, to use them. And third, bridge the gap. So our responsibility, of course, doesn't end with the acceptance letter. Whenever possible, you want to help ensure smooth transitions by connecting students directly to campus counseling centers or, again, local community resources. So if you can, make introductions, share contact information, or even role play those first outreach steps. And for many students, that warm handoff makes all the difference between getting help and falling through the cracks. So ultimately, this slide reminds us that post-secondary transition work isn't just about college readiness, it's really about life readiness. And our goal is to equip students not to just enroll, but to thrive. So now let's take this one step further. What does this work look like, again, in practice? So that first strategy is college selection with mental health in mind. So when we're helping students build their college lists, we can go beyond academics and costs. We want to encourage them to research the campus counseling center, not just if one exists, but how it operates. Like, is there a session limit? How long is the wait time? Do they offer telehealth? Like, also, we want to look at support groups, disability services, and campus wellness programs. Students deserve to know whether the institution they're considering has a culture of mental health support, not just prestige. The second is transition planning conversations. So these are critical. Before students leave, we can help them plan for practical issues that often get overlooked. Again, things like medication management, continuity of care, and knowing how to find a therapist near campus. So we can also guide them in creating simple crises plans, who to call, where to go, what to do if they feel unsafe or overwhelmed. And finally, we can encourage them to build wellness routines early, establishing sleep, nutrition and exercise habits that sustain emotional stability in a new environment. And third, alternative pathways. So sometimes the healthiest next step isn't immediate college enrollment. Again, things like gap years or community college starts, part-time coursework, or trade programs can be wonderful pathways for students who need more time to recover, regroup, or explore, or simply that's just a better direction for them. So as counselors, we can help reframe these choices not as detours, but as intentional routes to long-term growth and stability. So these are practical evidence-based ways, right, that we can embed mental health awareness into every step of the post-secondary planning process, so that students are not just accepted somewhere, but they're supported once they get there. So these are strategies you can bring back to your schools and start using immediately. No major overhaul required, just intentional shifts in practice. So let's start with the brief check-in protocols. We can integrate simple mental health screenings into our routine academic meetings. It's a quick, evidence-based way to identify students who may need additional support. Even a 2-minute check-in that asks, how have you been managing your stress lately, can open the door to critical conversations. Next, the warm handoff procedures. When a student needs help beyond our scope, the way we connect them to that next layer of care matters. So instead of just handing them a phone number or brochure, we can make the call together, obviously with parent permission, send an introductory email, or physically walk them to a resource center or office in the school complex. That warm handoff builds trust and dramatically increases the likelihood that the student will follow through. Third, whenever possible, we want to track academic attendance and counseling data in one shared system. So when those data streams live together, we can spot patterns early, like a student whose grades start slipping right after a family crisis, or who's missing class more often after an academic setback. These type of insights are going to allow for proactive rather than reactive intervention. And the fourth is um, parent and guardian education. So we often forget that families are our most powerful partners, we hope. offering short workshops, even virtual ones, on adolescent mental health care, stress warning signs, or how to support post secondary transitions can make a huge difference. And when caregivers understand what's happening developmentally, they become allies instead of feeling helpless. And finally, collaborative care teams. So, cross trained counseling works best when it's shared work, meeting regularly with teachers, administrators, school psychologists, and social workers ensures that no one person carries the full emotional load and that students receive coordinated, comprehensive care. I'm sure this is happening and already for many of you. So each of these tools can be implemented incrementally, but collectively they create a school culture where mental health and academic success are understood as inseparable. And I'd like to add one more layer that often goes unspoken, that family system. I talked about parents a little bit, but I want to acknowledge that sometimes the stress we're addressing doesn't originate within the student, right? It's being transmitted through family dynamics. And this can look like over involvement, high academic expectations, or prestige focused narrative about success. And in those cases, the cross-trained counselor takes a systemic approach. We don't blame parents, but we work to translate the conversation. So instead of saying your child is overwhelmed, we might say we're seeing early signs of burnout that can impact focus and long-term performance. So shifting from like judgment to shared care opens the door perhaps to collaboration. So our goal isn't to dismantle a family's values, but it's to widen the definition of success to include emotional health and things like self-advocacy and sustainable growth. So family systems awareness reminds us that no one intervention happens in isolation. Even the best strategies falter if the home narrative tells a student that rest or help seeking equals failure, right? So, when we're talking about equity and cross trained counseling, we're not just talking about access, we're talking about systemic repair. So, students from marginalized or historically underrepresented communities often face compounded barriers, reduced access to mental health care, cultural stigma around help seeking, discrimination based trauma, and structural inequities that limit post secondary opportunities. But inequity also shows up in more subtle ways through family expectations, cultural narratives of prestige, or pressure to succeed at any cost. So, for some students, these dynamics at home can become an invisible form of inequity where emotional well being is sacrificed for performance, right? And our job is to help families gently and respectfully reframe success so that it includes, again, health, belonging, and sustainability, not just achievement. I know easier said than done. Um, so, uh, what does equity focused practice actually look like? We want to disaggregate your data. We want to look at who's not being reached, which groups aren't showing up for counseling, or whose mental health referrals drop off before services begin. We want to honor the student's language, family structure, and worldview. So remember that mental health language itself can be culturally coded. We want to challenge the systemic barriers, things like access to advanced coursework, disciplinary bias, or college affordability that reinforce inequity. And we want to work with organizations serving specific populations like immigrant families, LGBTQIA youth, first generation students to expand that circle of care. So also, we want to look at how financial stress is a mental health factor. So scholarship and aid guidance aren't just academic tools, they can really be mental health interventions that reduce anxiety and restore agency. So equity-centered counseling reminds us that mental health cannot be separated from the systems that shape it, family systems, cultural systems, and institutional systems alike. And cross-training gives us that lens to navigate all three with compassion and competence. So, as inspiring as this all sounds, we know that implementation always runs into real world barriers, right? So here I'm naming the most common ones. So let's start with time constraints. We're all stretched thin, so this is about integration, not addition. And instead of creating a separate meeting for mental health check-ins, again, build those questions into the academic advising or college planning conversations you're already having. And again, those brief-based interventions, things like grounding exercises or short stress assessments, can fit naturally into those moments. Even a 1-minute pause to ask, how are you holding up this week, right? It can make a major difference. Next, scope of practice concerns. So this is where cross-training meets ethical clarity. So our role is to screen, support, and refer, not to diagnose or provide long-term treatment. So the key here is partnership, and when in doubt, consult with a licensed clinician or school psychologist to clarify next steps. Um, Remember, knowing your limits is a professional strength, not a deficit. And finally, overwhelming caseloads. This is the systemic challenge most counselors face daily. So ASCA recommends, as we know, a 250 to 1 ratio, and many of us are far beyond that. So the goal here is to advocate not just for better ratios, but for smarter systems. We want to use a tiered model of support, universal wellness programming for all students, targeted interventions for moderate needs, and intensive one-on-one support for high-risk cases. So that structure keeps the work sustainable and ensures that no student slips through the cracks. So the bigger message here is that cross-training doesn't mean doing more. It means doing what we already do in a more integrated and efficient way. As we close, I want to bring this full circle. So let's walk through these next steps together, right? We want to begin by reflecting on your own practice. Where do you already feel strong, and where might you want to deepen your skills? That could mean trauma-informed care, post-secondary mental health transitions, or simply expanding your awareness of community referral systems. So this step is about self-audit before self-expansion. And there are so many accessible training opportunities out there. Mental health first aid, suicide prevention programs, short courses on crisis intervention or CBT informed approaches. So many are free or low cost, and they can be woven into your professional growth plans. And cross training happens over time, like one certificate, one conversation, and one collaboration at a time. So next, you want to build your network, right? No one counselor can meet every need. So start by identifying your go-to partners, your local mental health agencies, your college counseling centers, your nonprofit organizations, or your peer counselors. A strong referral network transforms that siloed role into a system of care. Start small and build. So choose one point of integration, maybe adding a quick mental health screening question to your junior year college planning meetings, and expand from there. So the goal is progress, not perfection. Small, consistent change shift culture faster than any single initiative. And ultimately, the cross-trained counselor model is about alignment. It's about seeing academic, emotional, and post-secondary well-being as one continuum rather than separate tracks. So when we develop fluency across all three domains, we meet students exactly where they are and guide them not just toward graduation, but toward lives that are balanced, healthy, and sustainable. Um, So I know it's getting long, but I think one of the most powerful things, this is our final slide, that we can do for students as they transition to college is to make mental health part of the transition conversation, not an afterthought. So this slide is outlining primary resource categories available on most campuses and how we can help students actually use them. So our college counseling centers are the first line of support. We want to encourage students to visit the website before they arrive on campus, just to learn how to schedule appointments and what kinds of sessions are offered and whether they need to complete an intake form. So that familiarity reduces hesitation when stress spikes mid-semester. Peer support programs are another key layer. So many colleges have student-led mental health clubs or peer listening programs, and we want to remind students that community is often the best antidote to isolation, so they don't need to navigate campus life alone. Crisis resources and 24/7 support should always be reviewed during senior year planning meetings, and we want to have students save suicide and crisis lifelines in their phones and make sure they know how to access their school's emergency mental health services. Academic accommodations are often overlooked but critical, so we want to guide students toward their disability service office for mental health related support. So things like extended deadlines, flexible attendance, or reduced course loads when needed. So normalizing this as academic wellness, not weakness, can shift a student's entire sense of agency. So wellness programs and prevention, those are things that are focusing on proactive care. So things like yoga, mindfulness workshops, or stress management seminars. So students who engage early in these tend to build better coping habits. And Um, there are many technology-based platforms that are widely integrated, apps like Calm or Headspace. We want to encourage students to explore these before they even step foot on campus, because for many, they become an entry point to larger support systems. And finally, financial assistance. So many colleges offer a set number of free counseling sessions or low cost off campus referrals. And we want to help students understand those options in advance, which prevents finances from becoming another barrier to care. So again, we want to go beyond just handing out lists. We want to facilitate connection. That means talking with students early, helping them articulate what kind of support they might need, and even role playing how to reach out for help. And those smooth transitions require collaboration, sometimes with college counseling and disability offices, of course, with consent, just so we can help students practice some self advocacy before they leave high school. And ultimately, this type of connection is about prevention, right? So thank you for listening. Those of you who are inspired by this work and want to deepen your expertise, Manhattan University offers additional graduate credentials, including an advanced certificate in bilingual pupil personnel services and an advanced certificate in mental health counseling, in addition to our master's in school counseling. So each of these programs is designed to help expand your capacity to serve students across academic, mental health, and cultural domains. Thank you so much.